What if the most dangerous man who ever lived is still alive? Not as a legend, not as a warning carved into stone, but as a breathing, bleeding, wandering soul, moving through the same forests, the same ancient temples, the same silent riverbanks that exist in India right now. Today, as you watch this, his wound has never healed, not in 5,000 years. Every doctor who has tried to close it has failed. Every medicine known to humanity has been powerless against it. Because this wound was not made by any weapon forged by human hands. It was made by a god. And it was made to last forever. His name is Ashwatthama. And what Lord Krishna did to him on the last day of the greatest war this world has ever seen is something history was never supposed to tell you. He was not simply cursed to suffer. He was cursed to witness, to watch every empire he once fought for turn to dust, to watch every king, every warrior, every civilization he ever knew disappear, while he remained bleeding alone, forbidden from dying. The war of Kurukshetra ended thousands of years ago. Ashwatthama did not. Stay until the final minute, because the last revelation in this documentary is the one that will follow you long after the screen goes dark.
Somewhere in the dense forests of central India, a wounded man walks alone at night. His forehead bleeds without stopping, a wound that no medicine has ever sealed, no doctor has ever healed. He has been walking for over 5,000 years. And the terrifying part? There are people alive today who claim they have seen him. Before you continue watching this, subscribe to Virasat, Bharat ki Kahaniyan, because what you are about to hear is not a fairy tale. It is written in one of the most ancient texts humanity has ever produced, and it is still happening today. The name of this man is Ashwatthama, son of the greatest military teacher the world has ever known. Born with a divine gemstone embedded in the center of his forehead, a gem that made him invincible, fearless, and untouchable by hunger, thirst, and exhaustion. He was not merely a warrior. He was a force of nature shaped like a man. His father was Dronacharya, the supreme master of warfare who trained both the Pandavas and the Kauravas, the two rival dynasties whose conflict would tear the ancient world apart. From the moment Ashwatthama was born, the heavens themselves took notice. At the instant of his birth, he emitted a cry so powerful, so unearthly, that it resonated across the sky like the neighing of a divine celestial horse. A voice from the heavens then declared his name, Ashwatthama. He grew up not in wealth but in the shadows of those who had it. While princes drank milk, he drank water mixed with powdered rice, pretending it was the same. He watched others receive what he could not. And in that silence, a fire was being built inside him, a fire that would one day consume everything he loved. To understand what Ashwatthama became, one must understand the war that broke him, the Kurukshetra War, a conflict so enormous, so catastrophic, that ancient texts describe it as the event that ended an entire cosmic age. 18 days of battle, millions of warriors, the earth itself soaked in blood. Ashwatthama fought on the side of the Kauravas, not out of blind loyalty alone, but out of a bond deeper than blood. His closest companion was Duryodhana, the Kaurava prince, the man the world called corrupt and power-hungry, but whom Ashwatthama called his truest friend. While empires collapsed around them, that bond held, until it couldn't. By the 18th day, the Kauravas had fallen. Duryodhana lay dying on the blood-soaked ground of Kurukshetra, his body shattered by the mace of Bhima. Ashwatthama found him there, his king, his friend, the man he had fought beside through rivers of grief and fire. And in that moment, something inside Ashwatthama did not just break. It transformed into something monstrous. Duryodhana, with his final breath, appointed Ashwatthama as the last commander-in-chief of the Kaurava army, an army that no longer existed, a command over ruins and corpses. But Ashwatthama accepted it, because what he planned to do next did not require an army. It only required darkness. That night in the dense forest near the Pandava camp, Ashwatthama sat beneath an ancient banyan tree and watched something happen in the branches above him. An owl descending in silence, slaughtering a group of crows sleeping without defense, without warning, without mercy. And in that brutal scene, illuminated by nothing but moonlight, Ashwatthama found his plan. If an owl could destroy an entire nest of enemies while they slept, so could he. Against the pleading of his companions Kripa and Kritavarman, Ashwatthama entered the Pandava camp when every warrior was deep in sleep. What happened next is one of the darkest passages in all of human literature. He did not fight warriors. He slaughtered sleeping men, children, commanders, soldiers, all cut down before they could open their eyes. Among the dead were the 5 sons of Draupadi, the beloved wife of the Pandavas. 5 young men with their entire lives ahead of them. 5 futures extinguished in a single night of vengeance. Ashwatthama mistook them for the Pandava brothers themselves. But when the sun rose, he did not recoil in horror. He reported his deed to the dying Duryodhana as a victory. When the Pandavas discovered what had been done, their grief turned into something far colder than rage. They hunted Ashwatthama across the forests until they cornered him at the ashram of the sage Vyasa. Desperate, surrounded, and cornered by the most powerful warriors alive, Ashwatthama reached for the most destructive weapon ever conceived by the ancient world: the Brahmastra. The Brahmastra was not simply a weapon. Ancient texts describe it as a force capable of annihilating all creation, a weapon that, once released, could not be recalled without catastrophic consequence. When Arjuna released his own Brahmastra in response, the 2 divine weapons collided in the sky and the sages of the earth trembled. They knew that if both weapons detonated simultaneously, there would be nothing left. Arjuna, trained and disciplined, recalled his weapon as the sages pleaded. Ashwatthama could not. He did not possess the knowledge to retrieve it. So in a final act of absolute darkness, he redirected his Brahmastra toward the womb of Uttara, the daughter-in-law of Arjuna, carrying within her the last heir of the Pandava bloodline, an unborn child, the last thread of an entire dynasty. This single act, targeting a child not yet born, is what sealed Ashwatthama's fate forever. Lord Krishna intervened with the full force of his divine power, protecting the unborn Parikshit inside the womb. The child survived, but Ashwatthama's judgment had arrived. Krishna looked at Ashwatthama with a gaze that ancient texts describe as the calmest and most terrifying expression a human face can carry. He spoke the curse without anger, without shouting, with total, absolute certainty. The punishment would be a suffering no warrior had ever endured, because it would never end. The gem on Ashwatthama's forehead, the divine mani that had made him fearless and invincible since birth, was torn away. Not symbolically, physically ripped from the flesh of his skull, leaving behind an open wound that would never close, never scar, never stop bleeding. And then came the true horror of the curse. Ashwatthama would not die. He could not die. He would carry his living body across the earth for thousands of years, suffering from disease, isolation, and the constant unhealing agony of that wound on his forehead. No one would shelter him. No one would feed him. No society would accept him. He would walk forever, not as a ghost, but as a man of flesh and blood, cursed to feel every second of it. The ancient scriptures name 7 immortal beings, the Sapta Chiranjeevis, 7 souls condemned or blessed to remain on this earth until the final dissolution of the current cosmic age, the Kali Yuga. Their names are recorded in a sacred mantra recited even today by millions. Ashwatthama, King Bali, the sage Vyasa, Hanuman, Vibhishana, Kripa, and Parashurama. Each immortal carries a specific burden. Ashwatthama carries the heaviest one, the weight of a crime against the unborn. Here is where the story stops being mythology and starts becoming something else entirely. Because unlike most figures of ancient legend who vanish into the comfortable distance of the past, Ashwatthama has allegedly been seen. Not once. Not in a single ancient account buried in some forgotten manuscript, but across centuries, across different regions of India, by people who had no connection to each other. The accounts begin in the medieval period. In the year 1192, the great Rajput king Prithviraj Chauhan, after his catastrophic defeat against Muhammad of Ghor, retreated into the forests of central India. There, according to historical accounts preserved in oral tradition, he encountered an elderly man with a deep, festering scar running across his forehead. Prithviraj, himself a learned physician, offered to treat the wound. The old man accepted. Day after day, Prithviraj applied his most powerful medicines. The wound refused every treatment. After a week with no result, the king looked at the man and spoke what had begun as a thought and escaped as a whisper. "Are you Ashwatthama?" The old man said nothing. He simply stood and walked into the forest. He was never seen again. Centuries passed. The Mughal Empire rose and fell. The British arrived, colonized, and left. And still the accounts continued. In 1912, in the dense Shulpaneshwar forest near the village of Katarkeda in Madhya Pradesh, a revered saint named Vasudevanand Saraswati became hopelessly lost among the trees. He wandered for hours with no path and no direction. Then a strange figure appeared. Tall, robed, with ash covering his body and a cloth wrapped tightly around his forehead. The figure guided the saint through the forest to safety, without speaking more than necessary. When the saint asked his name, the figure gave no direct answer. He disappeared between the trees before the saint could look back. Vasudevanand Saraswati recorded this encounter in his own writings 2 years before his death, giving it only a few lines of description, as if the encounter were simply one more event on a long spiritual journey. The account that has disturbed the most modern researchers comes from a physician practicing traditional Ayurvedic medicine in Madhya Pradesh. The exact decade of the encounter is disputed, but the account has been circulated in regional newspapers and spoken of by doctors and scholars. A tall man arrived at the physician's practice with a wound on his forehead that was unlike anything the doctor had encountered. The wound was not infected in the conventional medical sense. It was simply open, perpetually bleeding, refusing to heal, as if the body itself was resisting recovery. The physician applied every compound in his knowledge: herbal pastes, antiseptic preparations, treatments that had never failed him before. Nothing changed. After multiple sessions with no progress, the physician looked at the man and spoke half-jokingly. "Your wound seems to belong to another age entirely. I begin to wonder if you are Ashwatthama himself." When the physician turned back around to apply the next treatment, the chair was empty. The patient had vanished. No sound of footsteps, no door opening, no trace. No The physician told this story until the end of his life. He never claimed certainty about what he had witnessed. He only said that in all his decades of medical practice, he had encountered one wound he could not explain, and one patient who disappeared in a manner that defied the physical world. Then there is the account of Pilot Baba. His name in the secular world was Kapil Advait, a decorated fighter pilot who served in the Indian Air Force before renouncing his military career for the path of a spiritual seeker. Pilot Baba was not a man given to fantasy. His life had been built on the precise, rational disciplines of aviation: instruments, calculations, navigation. In his autobiographical writings compiled under the title Himalaya Kahraha Hai, meaning the Himalayas are speaking, Pilot Baba recorded an encounter in the foothills of the northern Himalayas that he described without theatrical embellishment. He had encountered a man unlike any he had seen in his years of spiritual wandering, unusually tall, living among remote tribal communities in a region few outsiders ever reached, visiting a Shiva temple each morning before dawn, offering flowers to the Shivalinga and departing before daylight reached the shrine. Pilot Baba wrote that the man carried about him a presence that was not threatening, but was deeply unsettling. The kind of presence one might associate with someone who has seen too much, endured too long, and carries a grief too old to name. The encounter lasted only briefly, but it remained with Pilot Baba for the rest of his documented life. He never claimed absolute certainty. He only wrote what he had experienced, and he left it for the reader to decide. If you have reached this point in this documentary, and you know that what you are watching is unlike anything you have seen before, comment the word "eternal" below. Let us know that you are here, that you are searching, that you feel as we do, that some truths refuse to stay buried. The ancient fort of Asargarh stands near the city of Burhanpur in Madhya Pradesh, rising from dense forest with stone walls that have witnessed centuries of war, betrayal, and silence. The fort itself has a history stretching back to dynasties that predate the Mughal Empire. But for the local communities living around its base, the fortress carries a meaning that no history book has ever fully captured. Inside the fort, in a section of crumbling stone and shadow, stands an ancient Shiva temple. Priests of that temple have been saying the same thing for generations. Each morning before the first worshippers arrive, fresh flowers are found placed before the Shivalinga. The temple doors show no signs of forced entry. No footprints in the surrounding dust lead to any recognizable path. And the flowers are always varieties that do not grow in the immediate region. News channels, including Z News and News 18, conducted separate investigations of Asargarh Fort and the surrounding Burhanpur area. Both investigations documented the testimonies of locals who described, with remarkable consistency across different interviews, the same figure: an extremely tall man moving at night with a wound or indentation visible at the center of his forehead, who appears and disappears among the forest trees without explanation. Both investigations found no concrete scientific evidence, but both also noted that the local belief was not the product of rumor or mass hysteria. It was quiet, consistent, and had been part of this community's understanding of their landscape for longer than anyone could trace. Along the banks of the Narmada River, one of India's most sacred waterways, believed in Hindu tradition to be a river so holy that even the sight of it purifies a soul, sightings have clustered with a frequency that researchers of Indian folklore have noted as statistically remarkable. 6 of the 12 most documented accounts of encounters with a figure matching Ashwatthama's description have occurred within the Narmada Valley, particularly in the forests of Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat that line its banks. This is not coincidence in the view of those who have mapped these accounts. The Narmada has been associated with Shaivite worship, the worship of Lord Shiva, for thousands of years. And Ashwatthama, by the terms of his own curse, is a devoted and eternal penitent of Shiva. There is also the account preserved in Satsangi Jivan, a religious text composed by the Saint Shatanand Muni, describing the life of Bhagwan Swaminarayan. According to this text, the parents of Swaminarayan, Dharmdev and Bhaktimata, encountered a figure on their spiritual travels over 200 years ago, who matched the ancient description of Ashwatthama precisely. Tall, robed in orange, with his forehead bound in cloth, his eyes burning red, his entire body covered in sacred ash. The encounter lasted long enough to be recorded in detail, and the text preserves it not as mythology, but as an event that occurred on a specific journey, in a specific year. One of the most psychologically disturbing aspects of the collective accounts is what they share without coordination. No matter when the encounter occurred, whether in the 12th century or the 20th, no matter where in India it happened, whether in the northern Himalayas or the central forests of Madhya Pradesh, the figure is always described the same way: abnormally tall, solitary, moving away from human settlement, not toward it, recognizing when he has been identified, and disappearing before further questions can be asked. The ancient texts are precise about what Ashwatthama endures. They do not speak of peaceful wandering. They describe total annihilation of comfort. He is denied shelter in any home. He is denied food from any hand. He is denied the ordinary mercy of being acknowledged as a human being deserving of rest. He carries the sins of his victims on his body, not as metaphor, but as physical weight, as festering sores and lesions that spread across him without cease. The Brahmastra incident, his weaponization of a cosmic force against an unborn child, is the act that modern scholars of the Mahabharata describe as the most theologically charged moment in the entire epic. It represents not merely a war crime, but a crime against the future itself, an attempt to erase what had not yet come into existence. Krishna's punishment reflects the magnitude of that violation. If you attack the unborn, you are denied the mercy of death. You must live long enough to witness what you tried to destroy. Parikshit, the child Ashwatthama targeted in the womb, was saved by Krishna's intervention. He survived to become king. His descendants built dynasties. Civilizations rose and fell along rivers that his lineage helped govern. And according to the scriptures, somewhere in the forests and mountains of India, Ashwatthama watched all of it from a distance, unable to die, unable to be forgiven, unable to stop witnessing the very future he tried to prevent. There is a detail in the ancient texts that scholars rarely discuss in popular conversation. The curse Krishna placed on Ashwatthama was not infinite. It had a duration: 3,000 years. 3,000 years of wandering, disease, isolation, and the open wound. Scholars who have attempted to calculate the timeline of the Mahabharata place the Kurukshetra war at approximately 3,100 years before the Common Era, which means, according to the internal mathematics of the scripture itself, the original term of the curse has already expired, and yet the Chiranjeevis, the immortal ones, are bound to remain until the end of Kali Yuga, the current cosmic age, the age of moral deterioration, of forgetting, of distance from the divine, an age that Hindu cosmology describes as lasting 432,000 years in total, of which we have only lived through approximately 5,000. Ashwatthama is not nearing the end of his wandering. By the mathematics of cosmic time, he has barely begun. The scriptures offer one final resolution. At the end of Kali Yuga, Ashwatthama is prophesied to meet Kalki, the 10th and final avatar of Lord Vishnu, the destroyer who will come to cleanse the world before the cycle begins again. In some versions of the tradition, it is Ashwatthama himself who will assist Kalki. The warrior who committed the darkest act of the ancient world will play a role in the final reckoning of this age. The man who could not be killed by any weapon will survive long enough to witness the end of time itself. What does science say about all of this? Modern biology is unambiguous. The human body cannot survive for 5,000 years. Cells deteriorate, systems fail. The mechanisms of aging are documented and understood. There is no biological pathway to immortality as we currently define it. But the accounts are not claiming that Ashwatthama ages normally and simply refuses to die. The accounts describe a being that exists in a state outside conventional biology, one that modern science has no framework to evaluate, because science does not have tools designed to investigate divine curses placed by an incarnation of the supreme consciousness. What science can say is what it cannot explain, and the wound that a physician in Madhya Pradesh could not close with every remedy at his disposal, that science cannot explain. Kalinjar Fort in Uttar Pradesh, Shivneri Fort in Maharashtra, the cave temples scattered along the Narmada Valley, the dense forests of the Shulpaneshwar Sanctuary on the Gujarat-Madhya Pradesh border, the Himalayan foothills where Pilot Baba made his pilgrimage. These places form a map, not a tourist map, a map drawn in accounts spanning more than 8 centuries, pointing to the same wandering presence. In the Kaireshwar temple near Shivrajpur, outside the city of Kanpur, priests have spoken to local journalists about a tall figure who arrives at the temple compound after midnight and departs before the first morning light. His visits are not announced. They are only discovered through the flowers left behind, through the footprints that appear and then stop without reaching any exit, through the sound that those who have stayed awake through the night describe as something between prayer and mourning. There is something in the psychology of this story that demands attention. Every civilization in human history has produced legends of immortals, beings who outlast the normal span of life and wander the world carrying knowledge or punishment or both. The Greek wandering Jew, the Christian figure of Cain, the Norse Odin in disguise among mortals. Across every culture, the immortal wanderer carries the same symbolic weight. He is a witness, a warning, a living reminder that actions echo beyond the moment of their commission. But Ashwatthama is unique among these figures in one crucial respect. His immortality is not a gift. It is not a reward for virtue or a mark of divine favor. It is a punishment for something specific, for choosing the most cowardly and most destructive form of vengeance available to him. His endless life is the price of that choice. And unlike mythological figures who eventually find resolution, rest, or redemption, the texts provide Ashwatthama with nothing but waiting. Thousands of years of waiting for a cosmic event he cannot control or accelerate. Consider what 5,000 years of memory means. He was alive when the great empires of the ancient world were being built. He walked the forests of India when the Maurya Empire rose under Chandragupta and reached its philosophical peak under Ashoka. He was there, somewhere in the distance, when the Gupta Empire produced what historians call India's golden age of art, mathematics, and astronomy. He endured the invasions, the conversions, the colonial occupations, the independence movements. He has watched the land he once fought to protect change beyond recognition, cities where there were forests, roads where there were rivers, nations where there were kingdoms. And through all of it, the wound on his forehead bled. Every morning he placed flowers before a Shivalinga, seeking a forgiveness that the curse does not allow. Every night he returned to the forest. Every century brought new generations who had never heard his name, and then heard it again in the stories their grandparents told about a strange man in the trees with a wound that never healed. There is one question that the accounts never answer. One question that hangs over every reported sighting, every temple story, every encounter that ended with the figure vanishing into the dark. What is he thinking? After 5,000 years, what does this man carry in his mind when he walks the forests alone? Does he carry grief for the children he killed? Does he carry the face of Dronakarya, his father, who died deceived and broken on a battlefield because of a lie? Does he carry the memory of Duryodhana's final words and the man who made him a commander of nothing and sent him on a path of absolute destruction? The texts tell us that Ashwatthama wanders in search of death, not in the poetic sense, in the literal, desperate, urgent sense of a man who has been awake too long and can no longer remember what rest felt like. He searches for death the way the living search for water in a desert, and it never comes. This is the true horror concealed inside this story. Not the massacre, not the curse, not the weapon aimed at an unborn child. The true horror is simpler and more intimate than any of those things. It is the horror of being fully conscious, fully feeling, fully aware, and being unable to stop. Immortality in this telling is not a superpower. It is the inability to close your eyes. The world you are living in right now, with its noise and its speed and its 10,000 daily distractions, exists, according to the ancient mathematics of Hindu cosmology, inside the same cosmic age that Ashwatthama entered when he was cursed, Kali Yuga. And somewhere inside it, if the accounts can be believed, there is a man walking, tall, solitary, with a wound on his forehead that has never closed, watching the age unfold, waiting for its end. The Mahabharata is not simply a religious text. Modern scholars across institutions from Oxford to Banaras Hindu University have described it as the most comprehensive document of ancient human psychology ever produced, a text that encodes within its narrative the full spectrum of moral failure and consequence. Ashwatthama is not a villain created for the purpose of condemnation. He is a portrait of what happens when grief, loyalty, and power converge without the restraint of wisdom. He is what any of us might become under sufficient pressure, with sufficient capability. And that is precisely why his story has never died. The ancient Sanskrit mantra of the Sapta Chiranjeevis is still recited each morning by devoted Hindus across the world. Ashwatthama Balirvyaso Hanumanscha Vibhishana, Krupa Parasuramascha Saptaite Chiranjivina. 7 immortals, 7 burdens, 7 witnesses to the full length of human history. The mantra promises that those who recite it daily will live long lives free from disease. There is a particular weight in invoking the name of Ashwatthama in a prayer for health, the man who carries every disease as punishment called upon by the living to keep them well. Before this documentary closes, there is one final account worth examining, not because it provides proof, but because of who recorded it and under what circumstances. The Kannada poet Kumara Vyasa, writing his own version of the Mahabharata sometime in the 15th century, had a remarkable experience that his followers documented after his death. When he reached the section of the text known as the Gada Parva, the episode in which Duryodhana fights his final battle and falls, Kumara Vyasa reportedly stopped writing. Not from lack of inspiration, because a figure appeared before him. According to the account preserved in Kannada literary tradition, the figure was tall, grief-stricken, weeping openly at the memory of Duryodhana's death, a grief so raw that the poet was overwhelmed by it. The figure, witnesses present with Kumara Vyasa reported, confirmed what the poet had already begun to suspect. Kumara Vyasa's Mahabharata ends at the Gada Parva. He never wrote another word of the epic. Whether from reverence, shock, or something the accounts do not name, he stopped exactly where Ashwatthama's darkness began, 5,000 years, forests full of silence, temples visited before dawn by a presence no camera has captured, a wound that no medicine in recorded history has ever closed. These are not the ingredients of legend designed to comfort. They are the ingredients of something older and stranger than comfort, a truth the ancient world embedded in story form because it was too large and too relentless to be stated plainly. The truth is this: some actions carry consequences that outlast every human attempt to contain them. The war ended, the Pandavas ruled, civilizations rose and collapsed, the earth kept turning, and the man who attacked the unborn kept walking. Because some debts are not settled in a single lifetime. Some are settled in the full, unbroken length of an age. If this documentary reached something inside you, if you felt the weight of what 5,000 years of wandering might actually mean, then do one thing. Subscribe to Virasat, Bharat Ki Kahaniyan. Leave a like on this video, because the history buried beneath India's silence is deeper and stranger, and more magnificent than anything that has ever been taught in any classroom. And we have only just begun to uncover it. And before you go, if you want to dive deeper into the suppressed technologies, forbidden archaeology, and lost divine knowledge of ancient India, there is one place to start. The link for Forbidden Secrets of India, Lost Technology of the Gods, is in the description of this video. A complete investigation into the ancient knowledge that was hidden, erased, and silenced, waiting for those willing to look. The link is there. The choice is yours.